And the way these cameras are set, I guess
Three.
somewhere at the 30-minute mark, I'll go black, but I'll press a button and I'll be back very quickly. So.
Sure. 3, 2, 1, let's go. Welcome back, everybody, to the Strategy Sprints podcast. I'm your host, Simon Severino, and my guest today is the founder of Shemmassian Academic Consulting and one of the world's foremost experts on medical school admissions, college admissions, and graduate school admissions. For nearly 20 years, he and his team have helped thousands of students get into medical school and top colleges using his systematic approach. Welcome, everybody, Shirag Shemmassian.
Hey, nice to be on, Simon. Thank you for having me.
Shirag, what are you currently creating?
What am I currently creating? Really just working right now to, bolster foundational systems within our company. As you grow, I've learned, Simon, that, some things that worked when you were a fraction of the size don't work as well now. So you always have to, scale up your systems and the way you approach things at work, along with the, size that you are. As far as in terms of new creations, really doubling down right now on our YouTube channel. That's a very important thing for me. I've observed that, despite blogging very successfully for years now, there's something that just can't be replicated in terms of face-to-face. And I found that, our audience really craves hearing from me and hearing from, the experts on our team. And so just rethinking our entire YouTube strategy as far as the types of content we create, the way it looks, the way it flows. So it's really just, again, focusing on those internal systems and, bolstering the YouTube channel. Seems basic, but there are so many layers to it.
So what kind of things do you need to scale up for the people who don't know you? How are you growing? What do you need to systemize even more?
Sure. So, students come to us at various points in their college or medical school admissions journeys. So, I'm not sure how familiar folks who are listening are to the US sort of admission system, but there are so many pieces to it. When someone is right about to apply to a school, they have to write all these different essays. They have to choose the right schools. They have to request letters of recommendation. But years before the process begins, as far as taking the right courses, taking the right exams, and all this kind of stuff. So basically having clear systems for tracking student work, making sure that they're all plugged in, because some students are very, they stay on top of things. Some students sometimes disappear when there's a test and then they come back and they have to play catch up. So making sure that, we understand the better or the ebbs and flows of student work and figure out, okay, well, how do we change our timelines according to, how students are behaving? So if someone's really on top of it, that's great. You can sort of stretch out the work a little bit more. If someone is, the type of person who does things more at the last minute, well, we have to change our sort of deliverable dates and things like that. So getting much more sophisticated with student traffic and tracking and making sure that, with all the students that we're supporting, that, no one's slipping through the cracks, making sure that we're always on top of it. So those are really the big things. As far as on the YouTube side, because we're, publishing consistently every week, and there are writers. I have to record with a videographer. There's editing and stuff like that, making sure that all of our systems for that are really in place. So having videos, the first draft by a certain date, having to edit it by this date, making sure that all the different people are sort of talking to each other and making things go live. And it's going well, and continuing to just tweak kinks here and there.
How often do you publish content?
On our blog, about 2 pieces a week, and on our YouTube channel once a week.
And how big is your team? So you have somebody writing, then somebody recording, which is you, then somebody editing, somebody publishing. What are the roles?
Yeah, sure. As far as a YouTube video, it's funny. I was thinking about this the other day, Simon. People always say, like, just grab your iPhone and start recording. That's all you need. Well, to do things well, I think there are just so many, I'm sure as well with your podcast and everything, there are just so many layers to it. So for a typical YouTube video, we'll have someone on our team who's a writer, write a script, I'll review it just to make sure that we're getting the intended message across. It'll go back to them and maybe back to me. And then once that's finalized, we have to have a recording date. And so we have a local videographer who'll come and we'll actually shoot in my office. It's sort of set up like a studio. And then he'll edit it and then send it back to me. I'll review. I'll have my assistant, do a final check. Hey, did the edits I requested, did those all go through? And then I'll upload it and it'll go live. So I guess four people would touch every YouTube video.
Cool. I don't have a writer yet. How did you find a writer?
How do I find the writer? Well, we have some people on our team who consult with students who actually help people get into great schools, and they're writers. I mean, they've gone to great colleges, but they're writers by training, and so they were the first person to go to. So I never randomly looked for a random writer online. I feel like there are. I mean, even with people who are trained writers, it's very different writing, a poem or a novel than it is, writing essentially copywriting, right? Or doing this kind of educational content where we also want to engage the reader. The thing that I found that folks struggle with the most is trying to understand what the other person might be thinking at each point in a video or in a piece of blog content, right? So a lot of people can write, good, grammatically correct, all the information's there, but it doesn't necessarily give the person the feeling like, oh my gosh, like you knew exactly what I was thinking. And that's where there's just so much training, and you have to really invest in people because they're not gonna, it's not like, oh, I hired a writer, I paid my problem away, it's done. No, to do it well, again, you have to keep your pulse on these things.
Who do they study to become better? Like, for example, I study Stephen Colbert every evening because he has writers and he's in it himself, and I can see the process when I look at that. How do you train your staff? Who do they study?
So my staff doesn't study anyone. When I edit their work, I never edit anything just fixing the words or giving generic comment like make this more specific or something like that. I tell them why something is pretty good, but what it doesn't yet do. And for it to be great, it needs to do this other thing. And here's an example of how that other thing should be done. So when I send comments back, I tend to give sort of longer feedback because I found that that's the most helpful for people. So not just saying, I want this, but explaining why you want that thing and why right now it's good, but not quite there yet. And that's what I found that's really nice. But, with someone who full-time writes for a single, does a single type of writing, whether it's Stephen Colbert's writers or somebody else, you have to remember that they're focusing on that kind of writing. Day in, day out, they write for Stephen Colbert. If you told them, okay, now I want poetry, they're not going to be as good at that. And so you have to recognize too, unless someone is full-time writing your blog copy or YouTube copy or whatever the case might be, they're sort of going to be jumping back and forth between different types of writing. And there's also an issue with that because the headspace for this type of writing is different than this type of writing. And so you just have to constantly tune and refine, but it gets better over time. It's just that in the beginning you feel like, oh boy, I thought I hired a writer and, this was going to be all gravy, but there's more to it and you have to put in the time.
And so you take the time to teach them because you know in your mind how the flow should be. How do you come up with the flow? Where did you learn it?
Good question. I think there are a few ways I can answer that. The first is, I've written a lot of blog content over the years. So I started blogging, I don't know now, maybe 7 years ago. And in the beginning, I used to write very generic content. So, stuff like, have you ever had a moment where you did, just like sounding like a lot of other blogs out there? Because I would look, I would read stuff online and I thought, oh, that's how blogging's done. And because I speak with a lot of students and parents who are thinking about the admissions process, I started listening to the words that they were using, the questions they were asking, the pains they were having. when I said something, what their response was. So I picked up all the patterns. I took pages and pages and pages and pages of notes of what they were saying and why. Or if they asked a question, what was the question actually behind that, right? And so by just getting a lot of those repetitions and that experience, I was able to essentially figure out, okay, if I write this sentence, it's going to trigger this question. If I answer this question, it might trigger this other question. If I say this thing, it might worry someone about this other thing. And so I started writing in that way. And actually, probably 2-3 years into blogging, Simon, I looked back at some of the older posts and I was like, this is terrible. Like I have to, and so I like went back and fixed. So it's not like it's not like I was born doing this naturally, but you just have to continue to refine that. And anything, I think that you get incredible amounts of experience, and then you get much better over time. So now I can look at a blog content and figure out pretty quickly what's wrong with it, how it can be 10 times better. And usually it's like quite right there. I think most people can like get to this level just by writing a lot, but then to get to this level you have to really think about what you're writing and why. And I think that's what great copy is, understanding what the other person's thinking at every point.
I guess people, if you're listening right now and you don't have a blog, but you want to start creating content, and go and study his first posts and now his last posts, so that you see the whole development, and also you see that you don't have to be perfect with the first piece of content. And usually the first 50 are practice, and then you get better year by year. I am so curious who you pick for the strategy award after one word from our sponsors.
Hey, if you love what you are hearing, you will love our free masterclasses. Go grab them at strategysprints.com.
When everybody zigs, this person is zagging. But from your perspective, they're doing the right thing. Who do you pick for the award?
Yeah. So, as I've been thinking, going back to YouTube content and strategy, someone whose work has really resonated with me is a gentleman named Ali Abdal, who
Ali, yeah.
Cool. I don't know him. I've never met him. I've never spoken.
I know him well. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. So I just the reason why I really admire him and his work is just because a lot of people talk about be vulnerable and connect with your audience, be yourself, and all that kind of stuff. And I've just found that he's so good at that. It seems, I don't know him in person, I don't know what he's really like, but he gives you the feeling that what he is on video, the way he is on video, is just as he is in person. And sometimes he does things in his videos where I feel like most people who are starting out would cringe, like, oh, that might be unprofessional, or ooh, I shouldn't say that. But I think people really connect with him because feels like a real person, and he, on top of that, he gives incredible advice. And so a lot of people talk the talk, so to speak, right, where they're saying be yourself, do this, do that, but he's actually doing it, and incredibly successfully, and he's incredibly likable, it seems. I don't know him, but it's I feel like it would be hard to dislike him, and it's because he just sort of puts himself out there. And whether or not he feels a lot of self-consciousness when he does that, I don't know. Maybe he's developed that muscle over time, but it's just incredible to see how he does that so naturally.
Yes, absolutely. He's also somebody in our masterminds from who we learn storytelling from. He's the master storyteller. He's so authentic, and the real Ali is exactly like in the video.
I'm not surprised. Yeah.
And he starts always with "Hey friends," and that's how he well, first of all, storytelling and years and years and years of practice. But then especially he takes his audience very seriously. He knows exactly who he's talking to, and he creates for them. He wants to be of value, and then he has some branding moments that he always has constant. For example, starting with "Hey friends," and then he picks up some stuff that people do in the comments, like "insanely productive" or Gymshark or whatever they pick up, he reuses and he plays with it. And so, yes, there is a lot to be learned from Ali Abdal. Yeah, thank you for nominating him.
Yeah, he's terrific.
3 books that inspired you a lot.
Yeah, so these are books that I read years ago, and I always go back to this. So the first one is a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's a very famous book, and a lot of it is about real. On its face, it looks a lot about like real estate and building passive income and all that kind of stuff, but it's really about changing your mindset about how to achieve financial independence, what that even means. And the reason why I found this really powerful is because years ago, when I was first introduced to entrepreneurship, it was by a good friend of mine, my best friend. He's like, read this book. I thought it was really good. And Rich Dad Poor Dad, I don't even know if I've read it since then. I probably read it over 10 years ago now. But I was like, man, these are really interesting ideas. And I think at the end there was like a book list, like read these other books too. And so it was really important for me in my life, especially at the time, because it set me down this path of learning about personal growth and entrepreneurship and things like that. But the 2 other books that I think were incredibly helpful to me, growing up with parents who aren't entrepreneurial at all, they had escaped a war-torn country. I was sort of brought up in the States thinking a lot about like security and get a good job and be safe and all this kind of stuff. So 2 books that really pushed me were Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. That's a classic. The other one's also a classic. It would be How to Win Friends and Influence People. So going back to copywriting and things like this, I think people, Simon, will see books and they'll see advice and they'll think something might be outdated, or they'll see on its face, what do you mean how to win friends and influence people? What do you mean smile and say someone's name? What do you mean ask about them? It seems so simple, but when you actually put it into practice and you're in a social situation or a sales situation or whatever, most people just kind of go to their default. And so putting this into practice is incredibly tough. And it influences my copywriting too. It's what do they care about? I've just always thought that, no one, and I don't mean this in a self-effacing way, but no one cares about me, right? No one's dying to know, about me. They care about me insofar as I can help them, right? And so the information I give, even if it's about me or vulnerable or whatever, it's to connect with them. And people are self-interested, not in a bad way, but because they have a problem and they're coming to you because they want the solution. So they want you to focus on them, their issues, to think about what their questions might be. And How to Win Friends is probably the single most influential book for me.
That has came up so many times, so it's still a very helpful book. It's amazing, how long it has impact. Beautiful. What are you excited about looking forward with your blog?
Yeah, looking forward with the blog. So one of the projects that I'm really pumped about wrapping up right now is for medical schools here, there's a test called the MCAT. It's the Medical College Admissions Test. If people are familiar with the SAT or the ACT for undergraduate colleges, this is sort of the big test for medical school. And I know that test prep, is really, really expensive. And so people, have to buy these multiple $100 books, go to these courses and things like this. And I decided early last year, I want to put all of the content on our site for free for that exam. And it's a beast. So if you buy this stuff in a book, it's like, it's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages, these mass. So we're essentially putting the whole thing on our site for people who either can't afford it or, don't want to buy it or want to supplement their prep. And we're almost done with that. I thought it was like really, really crazy when we thought of it last year. So it's taken, over a year to really get that down. And I think in the next few months, it'll be all done. So that's something I'm really excited about for folks to share it. It's just incredible, Simon, how many people in the comments are engaging with it. with practice questions, asking for, hey, I know the answer is this, but I thought it was this. Could you explain? And so there's sort of this like community building. And that was not our intention. It was just to put the content up, and it's really cool to see people engaging with it. And, from there we may, develop a course on the exam or something of that sort. But right now I'm just really pumped to get it out for free for everybody.
Super cool. And where can people read your blog? What's the best address to go?
Yeah, they can go to Shemmassian.com. So Shemmassian. I'm sure you'll link to it. And then in the top navigation, there's blog. And depending on whether you're interested in, medical school admissions or college admissions or whatever the case might be, that's the best place to go. And then again, same name on the YouTube channel. I years ago when I started the business, I put my name on it because I had no business training. I didn't think about what that might mean. Obviously, Shemmassian is not the most intuitive name to type, but the fortunate thing is that you're not going to confuse our name with somebody else's company because it doesn't sound like anything else. So pros and cons, but yeah, you can find us that way.
Well, in terms of SEO, is it easy for you to be absolutely uniquely found, or is it or does it make everything harder?
No, I don't think we've struggled at all with SEO as far as my name impacting things, because back in the day when I was I started blogging, Simon, I didn't know anything about blogging, right? Like I said, I didn't know anything about SEO, and I was working with students and they kept asking questions. I wanted to send them resources online. I didn't find anything I liked enough. And so I started writing, and I said, okay, if I'm to write, I want this to cover everything about this topic. And so started writing very comprehensively, and then strangers started calling me, whereas before there was mostly word of mouth. And I was like, who are these people? How are they? And they're like, oh, I found you on Google. I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, oh, your stuff shows up. I was like, what? And, so like when you're a Google user and you're not experienced with SEO things, I was surprised. I was like, well, how does Google choose what to put? And so over time, I think as our site has become more authoritative in our niche, Google also recognizes that. So they now probably associate my name with, these admissions processes. And so it's worked out just fine.
Also, in terms of SEO, I learned from an SEO guru who was here a couple of days ago that the Google ranks for trust and expertise. And the trust backlinks, the best ones on the whole planet are universities.
Yep.
And I'm on your blog right now, and I see there Yale, Stanford, Northwestern, Berkeley, UCLA. That's very good for findability.
Yeah, and it aligns perfectly with our niche. We help students get into these places, and over time too. And this was just it's not something we did on purpose, but there have been major universities that have like linked to our site because they're like, oh, if you want help on, they might have like a career office at the university, and they're like, oh, if you want more reading on this, go to this. And then we're like, oh, wow, that's amazing to get the link from that university. So yeah, it's just it's been very fortuitous.
Absolutely. How do you see the education system in the US in general? Is it still helpful, fair, pushing towards freedom of possibilities?
Wow, that's a very loaded question, and you're asking it at a very interesting time because of COVID, there is so much that has been disrupted. So with medical school admissions, for instance, what ended up happening this past admission cycle is because so many of the MCAT test dates were canceled and uprooted and things like this. Two things happened. Number one is some schools went test optional, meaning for the first time, like you didn't have to take the MCAT. And we actually helped people get into even Stanford Medical School without an MCAT score, which was literally impossible a year ago. And I don't know how much that trend will continue. But what ended up happening too is, there was the whole Fauci effect, right? Fellow Italian, right? Where where everyone was like, wow, he's making such a big difference in the world. I really do want to pursue healthcare. So we saw applications go up by like 20%. And so it was tougher than ever. And so that's really impacted admissions. On the college side, the changes are probably even more disruptive because pretty much every school went ACT or SAT optional this last cycle. And people were nervous about, well, where am I going to get in? So students applied to more schools last year than ever. And so a lot of students who probably wouldn't make it into certain universities because of their SAT or ACT, might have gotten in. Others who had really high scores, because it became optional or some schools didn't accept it, like the University of California system, they didn't get into places that they would have in other years, right? And so what is that fair? Is that not fair? That's a huge question in the United States, because a lot of those issues, are tied up very intimately with, race and socioeconomic status and what that allows for achievement and all these different things. And so, some people would argue, well, now it is more equitable. But then some folks who have done very well academically who didn't get in, they'll say, well, it's supposed to be merit-based. And I did all the right things. Why am I not getting rewarded for that? So it's a very, very, very complicated question in the United States. Where is it heading? I think I think in the next few years, we're going to see, again, a lot of disruption. Folks that historically might have not gotten in, get in. Folks who historically might have, might not now. And we have to adjust. But I think it brings up the importance of what you're doing outside of the classroom, your extracurricular achievements, what you're doing within your community, because colleges and universities are looking for leaders and folks they would consider quote unquote citizens of the world, and folks who actually care about doing good things rather than just achieving at a high level inside the classroom. So that's a big change. I think it's something that we've already seen trending over the years, the focus on what you do outside the classroom, but I think it just went to a whole different level this past cycle.
Super cool. Who should be my next guest?
Who should be your next guest? Someone I really enjoy, personally, but also professionally. There's a gentleman in my neck of the woods in Southern California, Matthew LaRiva. I strongly encourage you to contact him. He's somebody who is just so thoughtful about business. I've spoken with him on multiple occasions. He focuses on ACT and SAT test prep, so related to my niche, I guess. And just the way he thinks about business, and I've seen him make key changes and key hires to really boost like marketing efforts and sales efforts, and he sometimes refers people to me. I refer people to him, and everyone who comes to me from him just raves about how well he takes care of his students. So if you want to talk about service delivery and business strategy, I think he'd be terrific.
Super cool. Is there anything I forgot to ask you?
Boy, anything you forgot to ask me? Nothing comes to mind just yet, but surely something will pop up.
I enjoyed this interview so much. Everybody, go to Shemmassianconsulting.com, and this is where you find the blog, and you find also all the wisdom and the journey of Shirag Shemmassian. Thank you so much for being here, sharing your journey, your wisdom with us. Please come back soon.
Thanks for having me.
Avoid trying to do thousands of things that doesn't work. We have 274 templates for your business success. Reach your ambitious goals with one-on-one sprint coach. We double your revenue in 90 days.